Hey, welcome to another episode of Power Athlete Radio. Nice. And we have some guests in the studio today.
Two big guests in town. Well, I guess they both live here. So we're fortunate to have them together.
Well, they've come to BK.
In the same room.
Yeah. All the way out to BK.
This is far for Doc.
I don't get out much.
Well, they don't let you out of the cage much.
Yes. So
it's not good for society.
Dr. Kirk Parsley speaking, former Power Athlete Radio guest, and Mike Sarraille. Now he's speaking. When I pointed at you.
Yes.
Awesome.
Sure. What's up?
And former Power Athlete Radio guest as well. Now we got them both combined, and we're not us, John and I, but y'all are on a mission, and we're on a mission to highlight everything you're aiming to accomplish in your upcoming ventures.
Yeah, so let's get some background on what adventures you have. I mean, it's pretty amazing stuff, and I think people would love to hear about it.
Yeah. So I think last time I was here, it was post Everest.
Yeah.
We knocked that out. So a group of us had come together and, not out of boredom at all, just looking for what is that next thrill. I came up with the idea of 7 continents, 7 days, 7 skydives, which is not a new concept, which multiple groups have tried to pull off and all failed. Logistically, it's a nut roll. And we're even hitting obstacles as we speak. And we kick off on December 30th. We will get it done one way or the other. Even if we don't do 7 days, let's say we did 14 days, we still set the record. There is a group that did 7 continents, 7 days, 7 tandem skydives, and they did it in 7 months. So I'm sorry, not 7 days, but 7 months. So a group.
What a bunch of fucking losers.
I know. We've got a group of.
We've got that. Yeah,
even
if we have to walk and swim,
set yourself up
we'll
for
do
success.
that.
You don't set yourself up for failure. Even without a private jet, we'll do it commercially. We've got the ability to hit Antarctica, South America, North America, 3 continents within probably 2 days. Mm-hmm. We can jump all 3. So mostly Navy SEALs, 75th Army Ranger Regiment, the real badasses, SF, 1 Marine Scout Sniper, the Black Rifle Coffee guys. We've got a lot of great sponsors, and starts in Antarctica, as I said, Santiago. From there, Chile, Miami, on to Barcelona, Cairo, Egypt. We're going to jump over the pyramids, then on to UAE, Abu Dhabi, and then on to Perth.
I thought they weren't going to let us do the pyramids. They changed it.
They are.
That's
so,
nice.
And that was we weren't pushing for that, but they came back and they're like, if you guys want to do it, we'll do it. We're like, yeah, of course we're going to jump over the pyramids.
A fucking great deal.
What else is there in Egypt?
Poverty.
Just fed it somebody.
Other than maybe landing on the back of the Sphinx.
And then we will fly back and do a ceremonial jump into Tampa, which is the home of U.S. SOCOM, for those that don't know. And hopefully we can have some of the families of the fallen that we're jumping in honor of. We can have our families, the press and media, and our sponsors. And then, ultimately each jump is in honor of a fallen comrade. We'll tell their stories in the documentary, which is going to be filmed by Dan Myrick, the producer director of the Blair Witch Project, as well as Christian Crumple. And additionally, we're trying to raise 1,400 scholarships for Folds of Honor, which does educational scholarships for spouses and children of military service members and first responders. And so a lot of good causes behind it. And I think the best part is this group of 15 dudes, it's like the band is back together. Even though some of us never served directly with each other, it's that same environment.
Who are the 7 individuals that you guys are representing in the jumps?
I know mine by name, Michael Mansour, who jumped on a grenade 3 feet from me to save my life. That'll be Antarctica. I want to say Andy's jumping for Dave Hall.
And isn't Mike Mansour from the CrossFit, Michael? Isn't that him?
Yeah. So there's the Mike Murphy.
Yeah, it was Murph, but they have a Michael workout that I thought was for Mike Mansour.
Do they now?
That's one of the original ones. I think it's isn't it like GHD sit-ups and 400-meter runs or something?
We're going to have to look that one up.
He asked me the same thing earlier. I was like, I don't know.
Well,
and I said the same thing. I'm like, well, I know there's Murph. But that's
well, I know the Murph one because, we did.
Triple Murph this year.
Yeah, well, you just keep adding Murphs. So we went to a gym in Illinois, and on the wall it said the home of the triple Murph. So they had basically taken the Murph and then times it by 3 to show how elite they are. I just thought it was terrible. But I know that there was a Michael workout, and I always thought it was Michael Mansour. Or
The Murph seems like it's become the most popular by far.
yeah, well and the CrossFit thing, it's just become.
What's
kind
the
of a
Murph
benchmark.
pull-ups and runs?
It's 100 pull-ups,
and
200 push-ups, 300 air squats, mile run, then mile run. So it's 2 miles and then.
That's awful.
Yeah, no, it's terrible, dude.
Not when I was young. It doesn't sound awful, but now.
Yeah, it's the 100 pull-ups. Like that's just fucking
Strict.
Yeah,
Yeah,
strict.
that'd take me a while.
No, strict.
Is it strict?
No,
because you
no.
swear 50 round.
Tex telling me he's been cheating the whole time.
Of course.
If you don't
Hey,
cheat,
play
you're
to
not
win.
trying hard enough. But it's supposed to be done with a 50-pound weighted vest.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so-
So then you're kidding.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
No self-respecting
Circle
man
pull-ups,
does skipped pull-ups.
I remember when we did it, when I actually owned a CrossFit gym, we were like, well, we fucking have to do it as a rite of passage. And the 100 weighted pull-ups with 50 was fucking arm exploding workout. The push-ups weren't bad, sit-ups weren't bad.
Yeah.
The run wasn't really a run. It was more of a
Yeah.
Yog.
no, what do you like jogging, but more like a stumble,
Yogging.
stumble, wait, stumble. It wasn't good.
Yeah.
So Michael Mansour, who
Andy's jumping for Dave Hall, who
yeah,
unfortunately took his life.
Mansour is the workout, the hero workout you're
oh, the
referring to.
Mansour.
Mansour,
Yeah.
And then-
4 rounds, 800-meter run, 20 sumo deadlift high pulls, 20 burpees, 100 farmer's carry. What's that? 100 yard farmer's carry, 40 sit-ups,
Okay, yeah, we did that.
weighted vest.
Yeah, that was an awful workout. I always thought that if we had a hero workout for Parsley, it would just be 6 miles of backwards running.
That went over my head.
8 hours of sleep.
Like it's just 8. Yeah, it would be 8 hours of sleep, and then
Followed by whiskey and steak.
Well, then 225 bench press, 405 back squat with duck feet.
Yeah.
let
me tell you something about
I
this
didn't
guy.
know. I didn't know Dave Hall passed away. I'm fucking it, but I mean that's. I know he and Andy were super close, and I knew him through Andy, so that's a sad deal. But I'm glad that we're remembering him in a positive way.
And it just goes to show everyone's dealing with demons, even though they may not show it publicly. The last jump into to Tampa will be for the Kabul 13.
Okay.
Those young Marines, I think one sailor, one soldier,
Yeah.
that passed away during the withdrawal. And so the cool thing too is we will set 2 world records. We have one 73-year-old who's going to be tandemed in Sky's a Mule. This mule kicks, former Marine back in the day.
Nice.
And he was part of the original record.
Yeah, so he was part of that 7
7
continent, 7 tandem jumps.
Well, the thing I love about Marines is even when they get old, they still identify as Marines.
Yeah.
Like I've met 75, 80-year-old Marines who still have the haircut and still introduce themselves as Marines.
Yeah.
And you're like, once a Marine, always Marine. That's what I always
Even
love
if they
about
only
them.
serve like 2 or 4 years, they
All
still, it's like
they've
part
got
of
to
their
do is
DNA.
go through Paris Island and it like changes their life. Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went through San Diego.
And they just like go,
Makes
hey,
me less-
There's a sticker on the back of their truck, and they're
Yeah.
in for life.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it.
The world records that we will set, and we will set them, are not going to bear our names. It's going to bear the names of the fallen, and so that we can present. Well, hopefully get multiple copies and present them to the families. So yeah, we're Legacy Expeditions is in full swing, and we've got some other expeditions like Drake's Passage, rowing that possibly in December of 2023
Oh wow.
from Antarctica
Yeah.
to the tip of South America, which are some of the roughest waters.
Yeah. We had Colin O'Brady on, who's the guy that walked across Antarctica by himself. We had him on the podcast. Pretty much, what was it, like 54 days with just
Yeah.
sled him.
I was going to say sled kill behind him.
Yeah, full of food. And it was just him walking by himself, unaided, nothing for X amount of days.
So he'd set up a tent.
I think,
Bivouac.
And then I
Yeah.
think he didn't stop for like the last 7 days. He just kept walking.
because he was going to run out of food or something.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, he just kept going. He was just like, "Fuck it, I won't stop." And so we had him on the podcast, and I went back and started researching all of like the historical, like the times that people had. It's pretty fascinating to like look at like that stretch as being one of the most treacherous on the planet. So,
That's insane.
He had a similar goal. It was 7 of the highest peak on each continent within, I don't know if it was 7 days, but it was certainly each continent.
I like, because I remember the K2 one, which is slightly lower than Everest, but like 400 times more gnarly.
Yes.
So he was on like that assault, and then I think like the guys assaulted right before them, and then they went up. And
Well, it was definitely not 7 days.
no, there's no way.
Yeah.
Because it takes you like
He couldn't walk the mountains. And
well, it also it takes you something like what was it, like 7 months to acclimatize at base camp. They got to like hang out there for a bunch of days.
Yeah.
Damn.
NIMS is a freak when it comes down to it. Just NIMS Day, 14 Peaks.
Yeah.
The guy's a freak.
Well, different guy, but
I know.
either
Yeah,
way,
no,
both are.
He's just saying that's what it's based off of.
Yeah.
This guy's.
Yeah.
So
no.
NIMS was a former British SPS guy who basically got out and leveraged, I think took a second mortgage on his house to do that. Of course, he's a Nepali, so he was with the Gurkhas. And then I think he was the first Gurkha to try out for British Special Forces and made it SPS. But have you seen the documentary?
No.
Oh, you've got to go watch it.
Okay.
The guys, you look at them, you wouldn't think otherwise, but there's something with the Sherpa, ethnicity. They must just oxygenate differently.
And it's.
I mean,
and
you
it's
grow up at that
generations in
elevation.
in that altitude too. It's like when I went to Peru, like there's not a flat square inch in that whole damn country. You're either going straight up or straight down all the time. There's just stairs everywhere, and we had all these people who'd been training for a year to run, to run the trail that goes to Machu Picchu, and it's a marathon, and they're going to run through it. Well, the Sherpas are just like random guys that they grabbed and said, "Hey, you want to help us?" And they had like these 200-pound backpacks on with like all the tents and food and everything
And
to
they're
set these
sprinting
people
up
up.
it.
And they did the thing twice in the length of time that all these people were running. And then they come by and we have the ceremony for them and we give them, a bunch of money for them, which is essentially like $30 for us. It was like $1,500 for them, and they're just like 22 to 30-year-old dudes who were like gardeners or worked at a shop, whatever. And somebody just grabbed them, like, yeah, I'll do it. And I was exhausted just like walking around, like just going to restaurants and just like walking from like going to sightseeing, whatever. Like my legs were smoked. I was tired like for 2 weeks the whole time I was there. And they like, it's a totally different animal, man. But you grow up in it.
There's a documentary about, I think it's called The Sea People, where there's, I don't know if you saw this, but there's a group of indigenous people, I think it's somewhere outside the Philippines, that live on no land. They live on basically these thatched islands that they've made, and their entire existence is in the sea. And like these guys have like, 6-minute like underwater free dives. They hunt, they're like, and they went and did a bunch of genetics. Like there's something different in their eyes. Their lungs are different, how they oxygenate blood. I mean, it's just like completely different set of things going on with those individuals that have adapted them to this life. So, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, if
humans are very adaptable.
So they basically changed their DNA.
Yeah.
And then passed it.
Yeah. It's
down to the next generation.
Yeah. And I mean, it's pretty much, like form follows function.
Yeah.
I mean, if this is your life, you're eventually going to live into it. I mean, you think about being born in Peru. I mean, that's all those individuals know. Yeah. And you're like, God, this is like some random gardener. But I mean, look at the Sherpa guys that carry all that stuff, and you'll see these people climbing Everest, and there's like a Sherpa dude with like a wool coat on.
Yeah.
And he's like with no crimpins, and all these dudes are covered in all this like North Face stuff, and the dude's like pulling the guy up, and you're like, he's like, oh, this is my 7th fucking summit this month.
Yeah. Well, and it's like when the ultra marathons first started getting popular, I had a SEAL buddy who got into them, and he had all his gear and his goo packs and like his schedule and his watch and his heart rate monitor, and knew exactly when he was going to eat and hydrate and all this stuff. And he's like, but every time I get my ass kicked by some Mexican guy who like ran with a burrito and he had like sandals made out of car tires. He beat everybody by 3 hours.
This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market.
We've built our online training business by partnering with Train Heroic and helping us deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training.
And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best tech and training, go to trainheroic.co/PowerAthleteHQ. And now back to the show.
Yeah.
Fuck, that's was there any talk of I don't know if you ever saw this, but did you ever see Bear Grylls? So I always thought Bear Grylls was like a complete fucking scam. Like I just thought it was always bullshit, because he'd be like, oh, look at this, like, and then they show the camera, he's like, right next to a like a hotel, and they just like, it was movie magic. So I always kind of thought he was bullshit. And then there was a deal on YouTube where those guys had those they're like those little like winged carts that have like a little, I don't know, fan on the back, and they somehow, like, he went over the top of Everest in it. And like we watched a YouTube video and he's like doing this, and all of a sudden he's like, woo, and like went over the top of Everest. And I was like, okay, that guy's not full of shit.
Bear Grylls.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to watch this.
So Kristen, our producer, he said, he was telling me, he's like, yeah, this expedition is Bear Grylls meets America's Greatest Race or something like that. Greatest American
Yeah,
Race?
The Amazing Race.
The Amazing Race. There you
Yeah.
go. I didn't know what either one of them were because I'm
So I think
I'm a
didn't
social
Bear
idiot,
Grylls
so-
get in trouble
Yeah.
for like sleeping in hotels?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah, and so it's
a good move.
They were also like shooting him, and then they like somebody came over and like was like, like Instagrammers in the wild was shooting, and he's like right next to a hotel, and they're like, oh, I'm out here in the wild, and it was all staging this shit. So I was like, this guy's full of shit. So I remember, this is years ago, we got online, and there was a YouTube video, and I don't know what they're called, but they're like these little like flight deals, and they have like a looks like a fan in the back.
oh, so basically he's under a canopy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, like a paraglider.
Yeah, like a
Yeah.
paraglider canopy. And these guys are going back and forth, and they're like, the winds are too much. And he's like, we're going for it. He's like, woohoo. I just remember he went over the top of Everest. And I'm like, okay, that guy's not a total fucking fraud. If he's basically in this small little hang glider with like what looked like a ceiling fan attached to his ass.
Yeah.
And he went over Everest.
But
So
was it Everest?
Yeah, it was legitimately Everest. He did it.
Movie magic.
It could be. I mean, it was on YouTube, so who knows? But was there any talk about you guys jumping out like at Everest, and was that ever on the table?
So, people are like, unfortunately, when we did some media, people are like, they landed on Everest. We're like, no, we did not land on Everest. We landed next to Everest. Could you land on Everest?
No. There's
No.
no.
Could somebody? I think you would need like a giant-sized hook and pile like tape onto the peak, and then I'd have to wear a suit, a hook and pile.
But I mean, you guys jumped out and then like went by Everest.
Yes.
I mean, obviously you landed.
Yep.
As you were going through that, like coming through the clouds and realizing what this is the tallest peak in the world. Was there?
So did y'all fall past the peak?
So
Yeah,
so
like-
you went out above
yes,
it and like fell
in essence, yes.
10,000 feet or something.
I want to say first you were so focused on getting a good
Yeah.
parachute over your head, but everything was on oxygen.
Yeah.
It was. I wish I could have stayed up there longer. I wasn't turning and burning whatsoever in terms of like steep turns, because you just wanted to stay under canopy at elevation as long as possible.
Sure.
But it was. I've told my wife and I told Andy, we're gonna have to take our spouses out there next year to do it, and I'll tandem my wife in to the same drop zones if I can get the guy who runs it to bless it off. But what the mention of Bear Grylls, what we want to do is for future trips, pretty much do the same thing but on steroids, where there's no camera crew.
I'm prescribing on the
on
steroids.
no camera crew on the ground. We jump in the camera crew, so everything is organic.
Yeah.
Almost sort of like a Les Stroud Survivor Man, if you remember that. He was
So wait a minute. Your wife and Andy's wife are going to let you guys tandem them in.
in Nepal.
There's no fucking way my wife would be like, you can go fuck yourself. There's absolutely no way you're getting in the air of that.
My wife has said the same thing. She's like, I don't know if you're that good.
Yeah, exactly. I don't
Like,
trust you
I'm
that
not.
much.
That's the
I've seen you
exciting
with
part.
the kids. You are not that good. You can't change the diaper.
There is one place, so Namche, which is the highest city in the world. You've seen the pictures.
Yeah.
It's like the half dome on tiers.
Yeah.
Just about an hour hike north of that at a higher elevation is something called the 360 Sherpa Lodge. And you wake up at 5 a.m. to watch the sun come over one of the peaks. And you just keep doing a 360. And it's just, you see Everest, you see Mont Blanc, you see all the major peaks, Lopsy. It is phenomenal. Even if you weren't doing jumps or climbing the mountains, just to go hike there and stay there one night and wake up in the morning and see that is like nothing I've ever seen before.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So what's the jumping in Antarctica? What part of, obviously Antarctica is real big. I mean, are you guys going to go off the shelf? Because Tex believes that's like where the end of the world, the shelf and the
wall.
And the wall.
Are you going to jump over the wall?
Off the wall. Yeah. So we are going to Union Glacier Camp.
Okay.
We'll have to stay there. So we arrive on the 3rd, according to the plan. We'll probably get a jump between then and the 9th. But the plan is to jump on the 9th. The 757 comes in to pick us up. So we jump the morning of the 9th. That thing comes in the afternoon. We get on there and we head off to
This is news
Santiago.
to me.
You realize that when you guys jump Antarctica, you'll be able to actually squash any of the flat Earth theories. Like that alone is good because you're like, well, if it was, we'll legitimately have cameras. I mean, we can see the curve. You can see all this.
So apparently, I guess the environmentalists don't like skydiving out in Antarctica, as if
Why?
the 100 other people in the camp like stomping around and do anything differently than we do.
Well, there's pyramids down
it's all
there,
the-
and that's where all the like the aliens and reptiles live.
It's all
So,
the farting that occurs because of the altitude, and you're putting CO2.
Yeah,
into the
you're bringing that CO2
environment.
down to the
That's what's
surface.
going on.
Oh, well, that was funny when we had Colin on. He was he showed up to give some talk, and there was some guy like hanging around. Finally, like goes over. He's like, hey, it's just his family's there, and the guy's like, okay, nobody's here. You can be honest. Like, you saw it, right? He's like, saw what? He's like, the edge, and he like went through this whole thing. He's like, I walked from end to end, and I didn't see any of the stuff. It was nothing but white. The guy's like, well, and he's like, no, but I went uphill, and then the GPS told me when I was going downhill. I legitimately went over the crest. And this guy was like, there's no way they got to you. And just like stormed off. And I'm like,
Well, that's
God damn
so
it.
to me, that's the true definition of a conspiracy theorist, right? Because a conspiracy theorist basically, no matter what evidence you provide, they're going to find a way to discredit that evidence and say why that doesn't matter. So I think if you just believe something that's non-mainstream, but nobody can give you good evidence as to why it's not true, it's not really a conspiracy theorist. It's just it's a belief.
it's a theory.
It's a theory.
Yeah.
For example,
But when you aren't willing to change your mind, no matter what, then
I
like
thought
if you
the difference between a conspiracy theory and a theory was just 6 months.
well, that's turning out to be true.
the biggest conspiracy I think that's out there is that Kirk Parsley was actually a SEAL.
Yeah,
I've never saw it. I've never met anyone that served with him.
yeah.
I know he was a doctor.
That's not true. I did meet somebody that served with them. So I have. And
I've got some cool guy pictures from the 80s, man. My
just you and the UDCs.
Yeah.
Let me just say this. If you've ever had a dinner with Kirk and he's surrounded with a bunch of guys from his era, you're talking like late 80s, 90s, and there's one in particular in Dripping Springs, Bruce,
Schliemann, yeah.
that you get a few drinks and the stories come out, and my wife was just like, she's like, I don't want you to hang
Why
out
aren't
with
these guys in prison?
because
we were SEALs.
We were fortunate that their generation did not go to war.
Yeah.
Because they would have been on the front page of every major news outlet. Just,
It was a different era.
It was a different time.
I think this is pre-Christ. Ethics didn't really exist, and
Well, there was a weird time, and we've talked about it on the podcast. There was a weird time in history, which actually was about 200 years, where we talk about like the death of God.
You talk about it.
I talk about it. It's my favorite part in philosophy, where like nobody believed in the Roman gods anymore, and it was before Jesus Christ. So there was like 200 years when like people like Parsley could just fucking crush shit. So. All right. So what else? The 7 continents. You're representing these guys. Is this just like the first piece in the puzzle? I mean, we obviously talked about a few other adventures associated with this. Is this kind of something that you guys are going to do and kind of extend into some different adventures?
yes, and it wasn't necessarily, I didn't go in with this sort of business proposal of what this would turn into. Everest was a proving concept. And we did raise $200,000 for the kids of Extortion 17.
Oh shit.
For scholarships. So, we would love to look at a pipeline where we can take those trips where, one, we like jumping into unknown DZs.
Mm-hmm.
DZs in elevation in the mountains that aren't traditional, sports drop zones.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to do it with veterans who need a spiritual awakening. And that could be as simple as like, hey, I used to ride on the side of Little Birds. I just need to feel that again.
Mm-hmm.
And then additionally, Logan Stark and Jericho Denman are involved. You got Andy Stumpf, you got Doc supporting with the human performance side, which is always interesting. I mean, Whoop is going to be looking at the performance of all the guys on the expedition, especially when you think about switching from time zone to time zone. We are specifically flying coach to, let's just say, inject a little pain.
See if I'll have an aneurysm. That's why we're doing it.
To mess with
I
guys'
recommend Doc in a middle seat.
Middle seat,
Yeah,
yeah.
middle seat the whole way.
Between two rather large people,
Yeah.
as if you're not large yourself.
Yeah.
So we are looking heavily at the human performance piece, and we're going to share that information with everyone. We're not holding that close, especially if there's a way, because we're looking at like these circadian rhythm glasses and lights to see if it helps sort of assimilate people to the different time zones. But the lack of sleep.
We're going to see. We're going to test a bunch of different things to see if we can what truly mitigates the unavoidable detriment to people's health and performance during this, right? So, of course, when you misalign everybody's circadian rhythms and changing locations and the stress and the frustration and chaotic sleep cycles and all of that stuff, like everybody's going to be, a shit sandwich essentially. And so we're going to see what types of things can we do that are going to help people, and we're doing some testing. We're doing salivary cortisol, like during it. We're doing some serum labs before and after, but it's too hard to ship everything back. So we're doing like some salivary cortisol along the way, and like some other testing, neurocog tests, strength tests, and things like that. Just watching people's decline, seeing. No, it's not true research. There's no IRB. People are just going to say, "Hey, I want to do that." Here's a smorgasbord of things you can choose from if you want to try it, like a supplement or whatever, some sort of the glasses, the retimers, all this type of stuff, we'll write it all up at the end and just say it's not going to be any surprise what we see as far as people declining over time, but there might be some surprises into what sorts of things work.
So Whoop with a band has created a group. Anyone can go onto the Whoop app and see how we're performing, recovery and strain. Yeah, so the public can get involved. I think everyone's going to decline pretty rapidly. At what
Really
point
quickly, yeah.
is going to be interesting. I think everyone will decline except for me, but that's just because of who I am.
Yeah. Is there a ton of physical stress with skydiving?
You know what? For a lot of guys, because a lot of these guys have a lot of jumps, it's not as noticeable from the early days, but I think it will pop its ugly head back up when guys are on the bird in Barcelona having a little sleep and get worse and worse. I think that the nerves will come back like, oh my God, I'm not at the traditional performance level.
And the altitude will matter as well, because they get up and they start getting slightly hypoxic and then the heart rate goes up, and it's stress that's raising their heart rate.
So that is why we conducted 1 week of training in Phoenix. We did that October
3
through 8. And so we got 550 jumps amongst the 13.
Oh, wow.
Safely done. We're going back December 5th to the 8th to do a second camp, working on canopy control skills, confined EZs, and putting process and procedure in place, because, we know this. It's that process and procedure that's going to get us through safely when your cognitive abilities and your performance start to dip from the sleep sleep deprivation. But ultimately, to your question, is we want to turn this into something where we can uphold the legacy of the fallen, hence legacy expeditions, tell their stories, because when their stories stop being told, that's when their stories die, as well as securing the education of their legacies left behind, their kids, their spouses. But we would love to also give and set up free fall camps for vets, some amputees, get them outfitted for specialized rigs every few months, where we take 15, 20 of them and get them their A license, put them through AFF, and give them the gift of flight.
Nice, dude. It's badass. So,
and we have an offer for you too.
Oh, you do?
The tandem seat. You should.
Yeah, I think he's outside.
There's no way, dude. I'm like 200. I remember years ago, Stump was like, you would have to weigh like 225.
There is a new rig that I think is up to 800 pounds between you. So it's the tandem heavy.
I'm talking about the
The $1 million?
Yeah.
Yeah, come on.
It's only
$9,
$1
man.
million you get to come along and do every jump.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
That's discretionary income for you. You just,
Yeah, it's
Take a week vacation, John. I got you.
yeah.
A week vacation that might end up being 3 weeks long. Yeah. You never know.
Hey, honey, I'll be back. That sounds. I mean,
I'll be back in one form or another.
If anybody is interested, reach out to Mike Sarraille.
Well,
put your offer in. Reach out to L. Robinson at foldsofonor.org. Larry Robinson, again, L. Robinson at foldsofhonor.org. And that money goes direct to Folds of Honor. It's 100% tax deductible. We did have some interested parties in the beginning. Somebody will pop that back up, and they'll be part of a world record attempt. So
nice.
Pretty cool.
Hey, Doc, I know you were just at a big peptide conference. I've been dying to ask you, is there anything next level on the peptide front that we need to know about?
Man, that's a
whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast. Yeah.
Well, as you guys know, Doc Parsley is a 99 level wizard when it comes to peptides and that type of stuff.
What would you say a peptide is, John?
It's actually just a whole bunch of little proteins that are bound together. And that's what peptides are. They're little proteins that bound together that elicit a response. And
they're characteristically smaller than proteins, but just a little change of amino acids.
Amino acids.
Yeah. And they vary, from 2 or 3 to 50, 60. I think tesmorellin's around something 70 or something like that. But they're in your body organically, and they have all sorts of. So, growth hormone, I want to say, is like 191 amino acids long, and when it gets first produced and gets cleaved down to 170 something, 150 something, 157, I don't know, something. But as you progressively cleave those amino acid blocks off, they have different physiological effects. So does growth hormone increase fatty oxidation and make you leaner? Yes. But you don't need the entire growth hormone molecule. You just need the little section in there, and that's the peptide. Mm. And so they're just figuring these things out by finding peptides and going, let's see what this does. And they put it in mice, and they start doing benchtop research with it, and they figure it out. Now the Russians have been doing this stuff since the 80s.
I thought it was even earlier before that.
Well, they were publishing
that the government knows about.
They were publishing in the 80s about it. So if you read Russian well, then you can at a technical level you could probably get a lot of data on it. But a lot of of course they're Olympic athletes, and getting past whatever testing we had in those days, because
wherever they're looking for Dianabol, and these dudes are using peptides.
Yeah. And so essentially every physiological function in your body is controlled by peptides to some degree.
Sure.
And so you can enhance, and you can ramp things up that you want to be higher, and you can settle things down that you want to be lower. And you have to understand a lot of cellular physiology to understand what's the right peptide for that, and that's kind of the game right now. And then you have to be able to get them, because they're all technically for research and not FDA approved. You can get them through pharmacies for research. But you can obviously buy anything off the internet, but I wouldn't recommend that.
I'm pretty sure you can buy a nuclear weapon if you really needed to.
And you buy peptides, and actually at the conference, one of the things that they presented was, and it was a third party, had nothing to do with anyone who sold peptides or dealt with them. It was a third party chemistry organization that they imported. I can't remember what it was, but it's one of the more common peptides, and I want to say it's 81 different samples, and 2 of them had the active ingredient in it, and those 2 only had 2% of what they claimed. So everybody was just buying crushed bird feathers and from China, and thinking they were taking peptides, and they're taking something totally inert or hopefully inert. Hopefully it wasn't harmful.
So really, the access is reputable place to get them.
Yeah, I mean, I would go through a physician who deals in that, and it's not that uncommon now. I mean, it's kind of in that age management medicine field. A lot of those guys have transitioned away from just giving everybody growth hormone to working with peptides. There's several thousand doctors in America that do it, and there's several hundred who are probably really good at it. So it's not that hard to find somebody.
My son's a type 1 diabetic. Yeah, so he's a type 1. And so there's a ton of research in the peptide field, like the semaglutide increasing beta cell density. I mean, there's all of this really interesting stuff that I'm like somehow like I set up alerts on Google. So I've been getting a ton of research, and then Doc always comes back with always some interesting stuff from these peptide stuff. So that's where I kind of have dived in, because I really think at some point they're going to figure out like how to turn the beta cells back on, which is really interesting. With type 1 diabetics, the beta cells get attacked, but yet the alpha cells don't. So like it's so weird that like this autoimmune thing attacks this one little thing. And for him, his beta cells are like they work sometimes, but not all the time. So like he doesn't take insulin every day for his meal, and sometimes he's fine. It's like this moving target because he's in something called the honeymoon, where his beta cells are still functioning. It's just like it's super inconsistent. So it's not like these other people where they're like, oh, their beta cells don't work, so they can kind of manage everything. For him, it's like you give him a half a unit of insulin and it doesn't do anything, and then other days it puts him in the tank. So it's like a constant, like he has a CGM on his arm. It's like this constant, like trying to hit a moving target. And I keep thinking that like of all of the stuff I've seen, they've done immunotherapies. I mean, like I'm on all, like I get all of these studies on the type 1 stuff. And, they've got into like immunosuppressants. They've got into this. I mean, the one thing at least I think is finding a way to replenish and kind of rebuild the beta cells, which I think is a viable option with the peptides.
Yeah. And the other thing that you can do is you can make his insulin sensitivity so amazing that, just putting, 2 or 3 standard deviations above the norm in insulin sensitivity, and then he actually needs less insulin to be healthy. And now you increase his beta cell density and increase, production of that. And coming at from a couple of different angles.
So sometime within his lifetime, that's what docs think. They'll figure a way to activate the.
I tried to research like how far back did we find about type 1, and there was writing in ancient Greek where they called it wasting disease, where an individual would die in a puddle of their own sugary urine. So they've had ancient Greek, thousands of years we've had this type 1 diabetes, and it's pretty amazing. Like the guy there's a Dr. Bernstein, who wrote a pretty good book called the Bernstein Protocol. He talks about like when they first started actually exogenous insulin. People would just die and there's nothing you can do. And then they came up with exogenous insulin, and they were getting it from pigs. And like he takes you on this whole journey where all of a sudden he would like take it, and they had no way to check your blood sugar. So he would just fall and like pass out, just go into like where the blood sugar drops and you go into diabetic coma, and then wake up like 3 days later and be like, oh fuck, I guess I took too much. The story is fucking like the craziest shit I've ever heard. It's like probably like if you go back and read like the SEAL Vietnam era SEALs, and you're like, Jesus, I would have died the first day. Those guys.
All medicine's crazy like that. If you look at the idea of blood transfusion, they did that in medical schools. Like up on the lectern, they'd say like, hey, a couple of people coming out, and they just like put blood from one person into another to prove that you could do this. Of course, they didn't know anything about blood typing, and so if the types didn't match, maybe both guys died, or maybe one guy died, and that's that was literally happening on a regular basis. Like, oh, there's this new concept, and they come in and they start doing it. And I don't know. You read about the frontal lobotomy and like what a bunch of quackery that was, and how long that lasted. And it's all pretty scary, man.
Well, there was a dude they were talking about was a battlefield surgeon, did the fastest amputation. Did you ever read this?
I didn't read that, but then I hear we take the largest jumps in medicine and understanding during wartime. And then we just had Omar Crispy on.
Definitely for trauma and and infectious disease.
Well, we had Omar on, and he had a 200-pound IED, blew up his Humvee, and burned 75 to 80% of his body. And the whole time as we're sitting here, your skin is your body's largest organ, and it's how your nervous system interacts with the surroundings, and it's like the skin, like the fact that he crispied himself. Like I just wonder, like his nervous system must be just like like it must. It's like. As we're sitting here talking, I'm like, man, this is the stuff that's going through my mind. And the fact that this dude is being able to sit here and have, good sense of humor with a laugh on his face. I'm like, this might be the toughest motherfucker on the planet.
And he spoke about his friends in different prosthetics and how advanced it's become since like the Iraqi freedom.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the prosthetics have come a really, really long way. I mean, especially the hands. Like they're doing some amazing things with hands.
There was a whole bunch of video stuff on like the prosthetics because I actually worked with a guy who was a below the knee amputee, and then I got reached out to a guy that was above the knee amputee, and there's like a huge distinction. The guys that are below the knee can live pretty normal. When they go above the knee, it's really dicey. So I got into this, and the fucking research, the computer models, and how they're doing this, and like they were talking about the cost, and I'm like, you know what? Fuck you. That's where I want my tax dollars. I want to earmark it. Like figure out how to get soldiers the most bitchin' prosthetics and let them live normal lives. Like that's what I want to. All my tax dollars. Like that's what we should be wasting, not fucking IRS agents.
We've got a guy on our training program, Grindstone. So James Simpson. Yeah. So he was in the UK, serves in the military, but now wheelchair rugby.
Murder ball.
Have
you seen this?
No.
Oh my, it's awesome.
These guys play rugby in wheelchairs and absolutely fuck each other up.
Yeah. So James posts his training on his Instagram. So it's cool to see him adapt and get creative to find Grindstone and connect it to still the movement pattern, still the planes of motion, and how he's able to do it and then carry it over to a badass.
Yeah, they're on these they have these bitchin' like wheelchairs that just go fucking Mach 1 and they just launch them into each other. It's fucking great. And I was like, this is the most violent thing I've ever seen. I'm in. But yeah, it's
and they're a protected group, so who can tell them not to do it, right?
And they're all in on it. Yeah, and they're like, yeah, fuck you, don't tell me what to do.
It's like, hey, dude, I lost my legs. Yeah, kiss my ass.
But no, like the prosthetic stuff's really fascinating. But then there's the other part of us where we're like, fuck, man, like. This is the other piece. If you're going to send people to war, you have to have a plan in place to deal with them when they come back and take care of your fucking broken toys.
Right.
You can't send people over and expect them to do this and bring them home and then be like, you're on your own. Like if you send these individuals over there and you break your toys, fix your toys, take care of them. I think that to me personally is the most disgusting fucking most difficult thing for me to stomach as an American, to think that we don't take care of our individuals that go fight our wars.
Well, it's in the contract, and the problem with it is that it's a big administrative glut, like everything else. The VA started out as a good concept, and now it's just overwhelmed by bureaucracy. And this came up all the time when I was retiring SEALs. And none of them want to put in a disability package, because they're like, I'm not disabled, like I'm fine, and I'm like, that you're not, like that's not the point. That's not the agreement. The agreement was, hey, I will do anything you teach me to do, and jump out of planes, like whatever you want me to do, I'll do it, and you teach me how to do it, I'll do it. And their side of it is, and we'll fix everything that we break. And if we can't fix it, we'll compensate you for it. So being 100% disabled vet doesn't mean that you're 100% disabled. It means that's 100% of the amount of money they're willing to give you for everything they broke. Yeah. And you can be a totally normal looking guy, completely capable of going out and working out and doing, living life. But that doesn't mean that you don't have a ton of medical problems that they can't fix. And they're saying, well, since we can't fix it, here's a couple of $grand a month instead. Sure. And you can go try experimental treatments with that money, or, whatever, invest it if you think your life's going to be shorter or whatever, like that, that's the game. And that I will say that I think at least in our community, things are getting better. Sure. Right. But it's not from the VA. It's all from the nonprofit organizations, and And that's moving the needle though, because that stuff's getting some public attention, and it's gone beyond our community now. And there's lots of non-for-profits paying for, really crazy stuff like hyperbarics, right? Like we know hyperbarics works, but the FDA regulates the hell out of it.
I played in the NFL, which was pretty much like going to war.
Yeah.
According to Tom Brady.
Thing.
Yes. Yes. I just had Tom Herman on, the UT football coach, right before this on my podcast, and I'm like, so you and Tom Brady, it's like you guys both went to war. He's like, oh, I'm not.
So Doc, it's a joke because Doc and I are on this text thread where we're basically battling about him, like, oh yeah, playing the NFL is like going to war, and then I've said that was my silent jab at our fucking inside fucking deal. But yeah, we totally went to war. I fought imaginary wars in the trenches and the battles. It was great.
You asked a question about what the VA triggers me, like just to go on to the VA and just. It took me 2 years to get hearing aid replacements. I still don't have a replacement for my CPAP.
I've been out for 9 years. I haven't seen the VA once.
Well, I did. So funny enough, when I retired, they're like, "Hey, you got to go to either San Antonio for what is here? What's the base?
The Air Force Base?
Hood? Not here in Austin. Neighbor. Yeah. Like to go get your retired ID. I'm like, Roger, thanks. And then finally, I got mine about a year ago. And of course, I'm married now, so I need my wife to have one for insurance purposes. And I'm like, you're about to get an education and hurry up and wait around. Getting news.
And we don't do that here.
So
you got it over there.
The VA should be downsized, like every government organization, to a core set of.
If you just got rid of them and we just privatized them.
On the medicine side, completely 100%. On the educational benefit side, there's some administration that has to be for oversight, but the medicine side privatized. You can't fix your broken toys unless you fix society first. And I think if you look at some sort of case examples, the post-traumatic stress rate amongst Israeli soldiers is extremely low. And those guys see some shit because the entire society had to serve. So there is a common thread and a respect that they reintegrate their soldiers, having seen what their soldiers, for the most part, have seen. You see the same thing with, I'm trying to think of the great author, Tribe. It'll Come to Me.
God, I have that book.
But where he talked about, It'll Come to Me, but he talked about how Native American tribes reintegrate their veterans coming home into that tribal aspect. Well, there was a great article by one of the commandants recently that talked about the difference between society and in the military, and what he was advocating for is that the military should not be used for progressive testing of some of these ideologies. And he talked about how in the military, the culture...
Seth Godin.
Not Seth Godin.
Oh,
no.
Seth Godin.
Tribe. Sebastian Younger, right? Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Yeah, Sebastian Younger. Yep.
He talked about in the military, we try to enforce leadership principles or instill leadership principles like conformity. And conformity is not necessarily a bad thing. Even on a football team, there's got to be conformity to process and procedure. Everyone's not running their own way. Team ability, things like that. But he said overwhelmingly within the private sector or civilian populace that individuality is a high sort of leadership principle. And he's not saying that's not a bad thing. We all want some semblance of individuality. We want people to retain their self-identity. But when a veteran, regardless of whether they saw war or not, comes out of that tribal environment in the military and steps into it back into, I'm not going to say the real world, steps back into the civilian world, you're like, what the hell is this? It goes, it's an antithesis to everything you lived and breathed for 4 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and that you just have an allergic reaction.
Well, I mean, honestly, same thing happens in NFL players, right? Like, here's this job I had, and here's my friends, here's my identity. And then one day they just fucking show up and hand you your shit and push you out the door and say, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
And like, it isn't anybody walks around and says thank you for your service or anything, but they probably should, because it's a lot like serving in the military. I'm with you, dude.
Cut up those little snippets right there. Please send them to me. I will make those go viral.
Dude, I like when Tom Brady said that. Like,
but
I knew what he was trying. I knew what he was trying to
yes.
say. Like, like we go to training camp and it's this, and like I understand what he was trying to do. And the problem is people just fucking dove on it because they just want to fucking splash it.
And sometimes it's the veteran it's the veteran going crazy that was like in the military for 4 years, not denigrating someone's service the World War II generation, a lot of them only served for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I would never put myself next in their category. But maybe like was on a FOB in Iraq, and it's just they go off the hinge. It's like, hey, dude, he's making an analogy that he basically his life is consumed by football when he calm down.
Yeah. No,
I would say the one metaphor that would hold though for the NFL is that you're going from being the best in the world at something to being sort of a nobody, right? And that's what happens in the teams, right? So we have guys who serve 20 years.
Not a bad thing.
And they go from being like, I am the absolute best in the world at what I do. I went through this crazy selection process to be here. One of the few guys who could make it and thrive in this world. And now I'm going to get out and I'm going to go work in a cubicle and like compare myself to.
Or you get attacked by some county sheriff, like in the documentary First Blood.
Yeah.
John J. Rambo.
And then you can't get enough body bags at that point. Yeah.
It's a sad but true story.
Yeah.
So I stood up a program called Vetted, one of my many textbook failures stepping out of the military. Some good people like General Tony Kukula, who's a vice chancellor at UT. McCraven helped me a little. Admiral Bobby Inman, who's well known in Austin, helped me. But basically it was a MBA light for senior military leaders getting out, both enlisted and officer, to get about the financial acumen that they lacked and prepare them to either start businesses or get jobs. One of the things that we were
kind of like the Honor Foundation.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. But we were much more focused on the transition and preparation, but the financial and business piece. Yeah. One of the things we threw around, because there are a lot of analogies with pro sports, is that you're the very best and you lose your tribe. And then it's just like the NFL, the MLB, just like the military, are great getting you guys into the league. They are awful, regardless if you have a player union or not. Our player union is called the VA. Yeah. They're not good at putting people back into the real world. But we had talked about putting football players or pro athletes right next to some veterans because of the common threads. And some of these guys have money. These guys don't. Maybe they find something. They start businesses on entrepreneurship. We never got enough ahead until we hit some political roadblocks in Texas and we got shut down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was trying to do. So Joe Musselman, started the Honor Foundation, and he and I were actually working together when the whole thing started. We're pitching to try to do basically a year of really intense rehab for the SEALs, and like do things like their hormones and peptides and give them hyperbarics and,
and make them reflect
transcranial magnetic stimulation, whatever the cutting edge stuff was, like try to help these guys compensate for their deficits and ameliorate to the best we could for whatever, deficits they had. And we pitched it over and over and over and over again. And there just wasn't enough money for the medical side. Like we did a small little pilot in my brick and mortar practice in Point Loma, and it was too expensive. So now that's kind of what all the foundations are. Like I don't know how many SEAL foundations do we have? Like probably 6 or 7 or something.
Part of it is just timing.
Yeah,
I don't think people were ready.
Yeah, and so now those organizations are paying for a lot of that treatment that I was trying to get implemented back then. So they're paying for hyperbarics. They're paying, they're funding people to do psychedelics. They're funding peptide use. They're funding like just about any kind of transcranial magnets, transcranial ultrasounds. Whatever might help. That has some. That's not 100% voodoo. That has like some plausible credibility to it. And
I think personally, the hyperbaric chamber protocol was fucking huge for me.
and if you combine that with peptides, it's amazing. Like the difference, that's the biggest difference I've seen. And
Are those effects long lasting, or does it require recurrent?
We don't know.
That's what we're trying to figure out.
That's what we're in Dr. Joe DeRudy, who we met through Doc, who's like the, kind of the authority on this. So we text a bunch and I talked to Doc a lot, like, after you go through the 40 session protocol, because it was 5 sessions a week for 8 weeks, which is really fucking hard to do. But I did it, and I noticed a ton of cognitive improvement. And then I wondered is there like a topping off effect? Like, could I do one and this? And so I hit Joe constantly with these questions. He's like, nobody fucking knows. And I'm like, well, how often should you do it? He's like, I don't know. Nobody does.
that's and we don't even know like how short can you go, right? Like, so
there was one protocol that the Navy tested, and that's the only research they have because it was so financially. I guess like just the investment was so big that it was just they could only do one.
So maybe you could do it with 2 dives a day and do it in half the time.
Yeah,
we don't know.
So Joe's kind of doing the research on it.
But when like some of the effects, so like one of the things that it does is it increases basically the chemical pathways in your brain that help decrease inflammation in the brain and help regenerate damaged brain tissue and help new neural pathways to form. And one of the ways that it does that is by something called angioneogenesis or neovascularization. So you're growing new blood vessels, and obviously the benefit of hyperbarics is you don't need blood vessels to get the oxygen there.
So the body can use plasma to get oxygen around, and the plasma it absorbs so that it can oxygenate part of the brain that would never get oxygen.
But then that increased activity in those cellular environments lead to blood vessel growth. So there's actually peptides that can give you that will increase angioneogenesis as well. So then that goes, not only does that go faster, but then once you finish hyperbarics, let's see if 80% of your benefit came from that and you stay on the peptides, then you don't ever lose the new vessels. And then maybe you never need hyperbarics again. We don't know.
They were also testing psychedelics where with ketamine for people with depression. So what they were effectively doing is ketamine was jamming into parts of the brain that I guess it would never get to and helping people with that. So they've tested so it's pretty fascinating that they've taken these different things and then used the hyperbaric environment to like basically drive it into the brain.
Ketamine. I didn't know about the ketamine and psychedelics.
Ketamine
mixed with hyperbaric.
Yeah. So the low dose ketamine.
Yeah, they're doing it. They're trying it with just about everything right now.
They've tried psilocybin, and there's no absence of what people are trying. But I think what's fascinating on the hyperbarics is I didn't notice it immediately. It was like 6 months later that all of a sudden you're like cognitively like doing something. And I remember, I can't remember what I was doing, but I think I know what I was doing. My kids have games on their phones, and my daughter came over and was like, hey, I'm stuck in this part. And I was like, I picked it up and I was like, oh. And like, as I was like basically tearing this thing up, I'd never played. And she's like, Dad, you're pretty good at video games. I'm like, I've never played them. And I don't know. And she was like, you're way better than you used to be. And I'm like, is this luck? Like, what is it? But the only thing I could think of was like cognitively, I could see what was happening faster than what I normally would. And it was just kind of a weird effect. And I think I hit up Joe and he's like, oh yeah, no, you can test it with like video games or like there's cognitive testing that we've done before and after. We can see the effects. And he's like, and I'm like, well, how long do they last? He's like, we don't fucking know.
You make the assumption that you guys know all about the brain. But go through NICO, they're like, we scratched the surface.
We don't know anything about anything. Obviously, it's like there's a ton of fevers in medicine, but we know like 1% of what's going on. It's mainly descriptive. We use big words to describe what we saw, and people go, "Oh, they must know what they're talking about." It's like all we did is describe something. It's like you watch a car crash and you describe it and use Latin words, and now all of a sudden it's a big smart idea. It's like no, you just watch the car crash. Like that's all that happened. But like one of the things we know about psychedelics is that there's gates and there's gated regions in your brain. So certain regions of your brain don't typically communicate with other regions, and you have what's called the default mode network, right? It's like the parts of your brain you use on a routine basis to see the world and the way you see them, the way you see the world. Like that's who you are. That's kind of your default. And you can engage different regions of your brain that you don't ordinarily engage when you're under the effect of psychedelics. And then psychedelics decrease this stress in the brain, right? The amygdala, which is like our alarm system, it decreases that. And so now you take away the fear and you branch out, and even the hemisphere difference in our brain, right? You have sort of the novel, I'll use simplistic, right? So it's not quite true, but the creative side and the logic side. But you even get some of that communication, but you're getting different regions of your brain communicating that don't ordinarily communicate, and now you have hyperbarics in there. You have more blood flow in there. You have more oxygen in there. So those regions not only are communicating, but they have a higher energy level than they've had in the past. And so you accelerate both things, because you're trying to accelerate when you're dealing with people who have PTSD. By and large, what you're saying is there's some amount of brain damage there. It could be all inflammatory, but it's most likely there's some brain damage in there. So, well, if you've got all these new networks and a different way to get around this problem than you would have ever been able to do before, plus you've added a bunch of oxygen, you've added new blood vessels, you added BDNF, which is like repairing the brain, you're decreasing the inflammation of the brain, the brain's working better. And now you can come up with a new default mode network, right? You can see things that you've never seen before, and you can consider possibilities and avenues of ways of solving problems that you've never thought of before, and you would never think of under any other circumstances. You would never get there. So it's fascinating, but it's a roll of the dice. Like, we don't know how it's going to turn out. We just know that, hey, all these potentials exist.
Huh. Yeah. No, it's weird to me that hyperbarics have been around as long as they have, and we know nothing about the effect, but we know that it's positive. I mean, for me personally,
the Russians had 1,300 approved uses of hyperbarics, and we have, we just added a 14th. Israelis, I think, have like around 160 or something.
So when I was a current NFL player, my first year in Kansas City, we played opening day in Denver, and I got fucking smashed. And I called Tom Inklet on. I was like, Tom, what do we do? And he's like, hold on. And he sent me a hypoctic chamber. So I pretty much put a tent around my bed, and they hooked it up, and I could basically sleep at Everest Base Camp every night. And I slept like that for years. And like all of a sudden, like my conditioning was fucking phenomenal. And I would have owned a hyperbaric chamber if I was a current NFL player, and I'd come home every day after practice and get in that bitch. Like it like at that point,
I'd sleep in a hyperbaric chamber if I could have it,
Well, I mean, I was thinking on like what's the too much, Like, I mean, I know when we were doing the dives, it was 2.2.
You can test though, like so there's some pretty obvious markers, because your oxidative markers will go up if you have, because you're creating free radicals, right? And so when your oxidative markers go up too high and you can't supplement past it, then you've gone too far. But usually the first thing is you'll start getting some pulmonary toxicity. You'll start getting a little bit of cough and just kind of irritable, and you got to cut back. And that happened to me just in a regular table like you did, the 8 weeks, 5 days a week for 8 weeks.
Well, what's wild, and so my eyesight got so good that I pretty much had it was probably 25. Like my eyesight was so good that we were driving, and I said to my wife there was something, and I was like, hey, do you read that up there? And she's like, what the fuck are you looking at? And we got up on it, and she was like, you were able to read that? And I told Doc, he's like, his Doc's eyesight got worse. Yeah. So it oxygenates the eyeball, and it changes the, for me, it made mine better. For Doc, was like, I was fucking blind. I couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
I was like, I got like X-ray peepers.
And because you're dissolving, you're dissolving air bubbles, like into the aqueous humor, so the fluid in there. So you're actually expanding it. You're changing the shape of the eye a little bit. And so, if your focal point is a little back, and then you pull it back into place. But
it was unreal.
Mine's the other way. Like my focal point, it's as I'm getting older, it's getting a little further away. So it just made me worse.
I called Doc. I'm like, Doc, my fucking eyesight's so good. He's like, fuck, I can't see shit. I was like, oh, okay, so we got opposite problems.
I was reading street signs like this.
Oh yeah, it was.
I was going under them.
It's really, like whenever people talk about this, like life extension, and they talk about like, maybe, like it's all over the fucking internet. The only thing that I've really come to understand in all the podcasts we've done, the 600 plus and all the conversations, I think hyperbarics are legitimately one of those things that are regenerative to the point of like anti-aging. And then the other one is probably lifting weights and training and exercise.
Muscle mass.
Yeah. I mean, we had, thanks for introducing us to Gabrielle Leon.
She's awesome.
Yeah, she's a legit crazy person in a great way.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love it.
She, as I like to say, she pisses energy.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow, like you got to bring that down.
Yeah, she drinks a lot of coffee. I know because I like posted something on Instagram stories and she's like, I drink it all day. I'm like, I got it.
So she came in. I did a podcast with her. Then I drove her to Wes. He's out in like near the lake. He's got the Rogue Coffee, I believe, or something. He's got the outdoor gym.
Yeah.
Wes Whitlock.
Wes Whitlock. Yeah, nice guy. And she did a workout with him, then came back and I think was doing the podcast with you the next day. And I'm like, and this is a weekend for you?
Yeah.
I'm like, insane.
Yeah. She got kids and a husband and this, and she's
and she's part of one of the organizations where we're paying, that's treating the SEALs.
Yeah.
She did mention that.
Yeah.
She's
part of one of those. Yeah.
She got a ton of energy.
And she's married to a team guy. Someone said her husband's a SEAL, but
That's what she told
He's
her.
a SEAL, but someone said he's a doctor. But I didn't know
I think
that's
he's
true.
a former SEAL, and I think he's in med school.
That is accurate.
Yeah.
So I think his focus is going to be urology.
Okay.
So there's another one. Doc, you're not going to be the only one.
I wasn't the only one already.
Oh, I thought you were like the only guy.
No, we've got a couple that are astronauts, Blue Angel pilots, head of neurology, and SEALs. We have 2 of those. Yeah, I'm a low achiever, man. I'm a nobody in this organization.
I'm a little
man.
sad though that you were a peacetime SEAL. I think. I mean,
somebody's got to give Hollywood stuff to work with.
Yeah, Mike, how's the Everyday Warrior project coming?
It's coming along. It's grown substantially. It's going to take a little bit of a backseat for the next 2 months with 777, but we stacked episodes so that we have a backlog. And I think with Legacy Expeditions, it's just gonna keep growing. Men's Journal's been great. Too many things on my plate.
Oh, we get it.
that's good. No,
Yeah.
I always
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, no, it's great. Like I want to die trying to choke on eating the elephant. Like the idea. That's a ghost in here. Can you imagine if you had nothing to do? Like that scares me more
Boredom?
than anything.
When's the last time y'all felt bored?
I had something to say,
Yeah.
but I would get yelled at.
I'd be in the military.
Bored?
Like sitting around an airport in the military for like 6 days waiting for your ride.
I'd have to qualify that question in a couple different ways. Like, one, I love my wife. And I'm happy in that regard, but do you miss?
Yeah,
What's your race is everything you said before.
Slowly walking off the plane.
let me start by telling you I love my wife,
but you do miss the thrill of what we did. And what I loved so much, and it's the same thing with you guys in the NFL, is if you weren't growing, you were dying. And so when it's almost slowing down. Motion is lotion, and not doing that job, not pushing the limits in a very risk mitigated, smart way to promote growth. That's what I miss, and that's why Legacy Expeditions. I'm like, and I got it from the guys. I saw it. They're like, man, if I could just ride a little bird again, just for that thrill. I'm like, I think I have something, and actually something cooler that could give you a spiritual, emotional. Sort of awakening, in which you need every few months. But I'd say it's
and you also,
when I left the job.
also need this shit show of discomfort and chaos that's going to bring out everybody's inner comedian. There's nothing funnier than a bunch of SF guys like just suffering.
We are going to fuck
and
with
we're
each
going to
other.
be miserable as shit, and it's going to be so funny.
And you know who's going
it's
to
going
be
to be hysterical.
is Andy.
he has made men.
Yes, and so when you put 15 of these guys in coach on a flight from Barcelona to Egypt, while one's like finally sleeping, stand by. Stand by, because I think we're going to get air marshaled off of one of these flights when we arrive in like Egypt or somewhere else. It's going to be hilarious.
Should be fun.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring a lot of adhesive remover and antibiotics.
Well, I mean, the fact you have Doc, but if you don't notice, he's a fucking gorilla. So, and not only can he fucking beat you down, he's probably gonna be able to stitch you up. So, Doc, I always get a little nervous the day that like you decide to lose it. I'm like, I'm gonna have to take him down. This would be a fucking bad fight. Like Doc's like all mild mannered. One day he's gonna snap. I'm like, fuck, Parsley, I'm gonna have to fucking beat you to death.
I almost kind of snapped in your gym one day.
Yeah. And you know what? You should have.
I should have.
I know you should have. And I thank you for not killing anybody.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Anything else, Mr. McQuilk?
Well, we know 777.givesmart.com. So that's where people go. What can they expect once they get there?
It is a donation site for Folds of Honor. And all I'm asking is just for a little bit of help. You know, we like to say that everyone thanks you for your service until you ask them to make a sacrifice. Well, I'm asking them to make a small little sacrifice. Again, 100% of the donations go to spouses and children, educational sponsorships of military families and first responders. So dear to our hearts.
You'll be surprised who come out of the woodwork to help. I mean, we're right in the throes of Wade's Army, and we just hit $200,000.
No way.
Yeah, we just hit $200K this year.
Wow.
Today. And it's pretty amazing that, you know, a small charity with, you know, that we cobbled together between Chris and Tex and Luke and myself. And then we've, you know, over 10 years given it back to Heather and my wife and them to run. And, you know, we built the truck this year. So,
which hopefully I win.
Which, dude, I am so excited. I hope somebody.
I got 5 tickets.
I hope.
Colin bought 2.
Dude, I want one of my friends to win it, and I can't wait to go deliver it to him and fucking see him drive around in it. It's going to be awesome. We sold about 600 tickets, which is pretty amazing. So we've raised $60,000 off that truck, and we still got about 2 more weeks left. But DJ and I built that truck in about 5 weeks. It was over 600 hours. Yeah. And it was 104 degrees in the shop. So we were bleeding out of our eyes, but we built it, and it's a pretty amazing truck. So I'm stoked on it.
And that's one parked out.
Yeah. You saw
okay,
that
yeah.
The
blue.
the blue with the stripes.
Yeah.
But man, what's pretty amazing, and you'll see this with the charity. I'm sure you guys do. That like people will come out of the woodwork to help just because it's you, and more importantly, it's a good deal. Like I'll donate. Like, I mean, how could I not? I mean, we work in the SEAL community. We had contracts with Naval Special Warfare. I mean, to know these guys both socially in this, and the guys that pay the ultimate price, and a little bit of something to help their families along, it just makes a ton of sense. How can you not give to them?
We tried to send a note or just a quick little video to every single person that donates, whether it's $25 or we have, you know, with $1,000 yesterday. I'm like, $1,000 from somebody who doesn't know you.
Yeah.
Like that's powerful. That's impact.
So yeah, this is a great one. The other one I give to every year is Vet Paw. I don't know if you know those guys.
Yeah.
But pretty much it takes SF dudes and they send them to Africa to hunt poachers or protect the animals, but they really hunt poachers.
Yeah.
And I could not give, like, if I was like a Jeff Bezos or like just had like, you know, like an
So fun.
like that type of shit, I'd be like, what do you guys need? How can we protect all these white rhinos? Because I've never been to Africa and I've never seen a white rhino, and I have this like terrible feeling that they're going to kill the last one. And I'm not going to be able to see it, so I donate to those guys. But I mean, the SEAL Foundation, what you guys are doing is great. It's so important because you know, for us, these have been our friends. I mean, you know, I see Doc as, you know, as much as anybody, so it's a great deal, and you know, I'm stoked to support it. And thanks for coming, man.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's the word 777, the number, .givesmart.com.
Yes, sir.
Cool. All right. Well, and Everyday Warrior podcast.
Dude,
Men's Journal.
Men's
you've
Journal.
had some fucking banger guests.
And Doc. It's great.
We keep saying we got to have you on. We'll have you on, but
we started low.
I got one last question for each of you. Mike, you're in the leadership camp. Doc, you're in the medical camp. If you were to give people, think of battle the bullshit. Here's one guiding thing, how I want people to think when it comes to viewing and listening to leadership, and then taking care of your own health, Doc. So think of this battle the bullshit. What's one piece of guidance that you would give people in your respective fields?
You want to go first or me?
leadership is such a vague art. It requires constant reassessment. What made you successful as a leader of 10 will not make you successful as a leader of 100 or 1,000. And things evolve. So the bottom line with that is you don't know shit. And I recognize that I was not always the best leader, but ultimately you have to evolve as a leader. And if you think you've got to figure it out, you've got a hard lesson coming.
I would say, I mean, I don't want to really talk about medicine. I don't consider that my role. But if you want to talk about health, the most important thing to realize is that of the well-meaning, really educated, experienced providers, half of what they say is wrong. Of the people who are just trying to make a profession out of being some sort of health leader, 90% of what they say is wrong. The only way you can sift through the bullshit is to make yourself the expert on you. And you don't have to learn everything about everybody's specialty. You don't have to understand what every influencer says or understand every aspect of medicine, but you need to understand what you need to do to reach your goals. And your goals are your goals. If your goals are being smart, that's different than someone who wants to be strong. It's different than somebody who wants to live forever. Like, whatever your goals are, they're valid. It's your goals. Learn everything that you can about that and learn it from 10 or 15 different sources and try it on yourself. Nobody's coming to save you. You have to be not only your own advocate, but you have to be the expert on your health. I can study a disease my whole damn life, and I don't know anything about it compared to somebody who's lived with that disease for 20 years, right? Like what I know is a joke at that point compared to them. They've lived through it. They've gone through all these treatments. They understand them better than I will ever. And unfortunately, that takes time and it takes effort, but it's no different than the time and effort it takes to work out or to eat right or to, mow your damn lawn, take care of your house, whatever. Like it's part of being an adult. You need to know more about your health than anybody else. And don't put your faith 100% in anybody.
Well, but I also think too, you have to have trusted experts. Like, I reach out to
there's guys you reach out to and guys you trust, but like, I'll tell you, as a matter of fact, I'm 100% sure that half of what I think is true is wrong.
Well, but
I don't know which half. Well, that's the problem.
but how many individuals? I always think that's why I appreciated you, Doc, in that way. Was you're the first one to say that, like, but you talk to a lot of doctors, and it's like, I know everything. I have the lab coat and the degrees to prove it, and that I'm infallible. And you hear with such certainty, and I'm always like, how the fuck are these people this certain on this? And then it's funny, we'll talk about stuff and you're like, dude, there's not enough research to be certain on anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Science changes every damn day.
Boom.
Cool. Well, thanks for tuning in
to another episode of Power Athlete Radio.
Bye.